Hmm.
Okay. Hi, hi, welcome everybody to Talk Openly. It's Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. It's amazing.
Woohoo!
I don't know, it feels like it could be 2016 or 2021, who knows? But
Yeah.
we're back, and I'm so pleased to be joined by my wonderful friend Daniel. He's my buddy from Lions Road Dharma Center in Sacramento, and always just so great to see you, Daniel.
Hey, right back at you, buddy. Nice to see you too.
Thanks.
You know what? I'm oftentimes a little bit unhappy about the circular aspect of life, the cyclical aspect of it. You know how I was just telling a friend of mine today, I was like, yeah, sometimes it's like you're like there's a scratch on the vinyl, and
Yeah.
you hit it and it's like unpleasant, and then you're like, oh no, I'm in the clear, everything's fine, it's all good, this is fine, this is fine, and then it loops back around, you're like, there it is
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
right? And so there's oftentimes this sort of like negative aspect to it, but I'm super grateful for the cycle that includes you coming into my life every single week on a Tuesday.
That's very sweet. I feel similarly. Well, hey, Dan, you know what's funny? So the reason I was a little bit late today, is that I had to go get my bubbly water. And I thought
Oh,
that was
okay.
a really good reflection for this particular show tonight, which we're going to be talking about boredom. And I was just, I was reflecting on how, like, I don't just want like regular water when I'm doing the show. Like, I want something a little bit fancy. I want something a little bit special. And so I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about when it comes to boredom tonight. Did you get one too?
Let's see.
Nice. Ooh, that's one of the non-alcoholic Lagunitas. I've never tried that.
It's a sparkling hop water, and it's all the rage here
Yeah,
in this household. It's just a sparkly water with a little bit of hops. Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, it's the exact same thing. It's exactly like we want to flavor our awareness, so we is like the way we flavor our water. It's naturally clean, clear, pristine, all these things. Then we're like, can we get a little bit of bubble? And
I want it to be interesting. I
oh,
want it to
oh
be
God.
fun.
Nice, nice way to tie it all in, Jack.
Yeah.
You are so right.
Well, good. I'm glad, we're often in a similar boat, and so yes, some camaraderie in in acknowledging that those are things that we're working with. And that's okay. We're on the
That's
path.
right. That's right. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to our discussion about how we have this tendency to flavor our awareness.
Yeah, me too. Sweet. Well, before we do that, we're going to check in. We're also going to do some Low John slogans
Heck
later.
yeah.
But yeah, what's going on with you? What's your world like? What's your training like? What's happening?
Well, briefly, my world right now is kind of unexpectedly uh, easy, I suppose is the right word. My kids are out of town, and so is my business partner.
Ah.
And you would think that when the mice are away, the cat would play. I don't know how that would go, but anyway, in this case, I have been incredibly productive, and it's been super helpful. There's just less sort of like demands on my time and attention and things like that. So it's kind of nice to have these uninterrupted periods to like focus on projects and see them through to completion, which is rare for me. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. And then part of it too is it gave me a little bit more space. So I think I mentioned my meditation pattern has been mm, relatively consistent, but not the same in terms of the routine. Like I've been really just kind of holding on with very basic, minimalistic meditation practice each day, and I'm back to sort of like nice, steady sits thanks to this week. And like I think that routine is emerging again, and I'm really, really thankful for that because
Mhm.
it takes a while. Like like a short sit, it's helpful. Don't get me wrong. There's a good reason to do it,
Yeah.
but it takes my mind is so cluttered with sparkly water and flavors and
Yeah.
whatever. It's so cluttered that it takes a while for it to sort of decarbonate or whatever, right? For it to go flat again. And so I'm really grateful to be able to sit for longer and let it all sort of like mellow out and calm, because
Yeah.
it takes a while for it all to settle down. But like that's been a change for me, for the positive, and I'm super grateful for that.
Nice. That's exciting. Yeah. Do you notice, is there like a certain time period that you need until your mind is kind of ready to just be flat or not, not flat necessarily, but
Yeah.
a little more clear?
Well, one thing I've noticed is that it helps to shake the bottle or the can
Yeah.
before. So what I mean by that is, because then you'll get that sort of initial release.
Yeah.
And the way that that sort of shows up is in the form of doing a little bit of physical exercises, like our dear friend Sue teaches about, sort of like doing some stretches and stuff to get the body into, more pliable for seated meditation, for being more comfortable.
Mm.
And so that aspect of it, and then also doing a little bit of Tonglen in the beginning. Well, okay, so the body stretching stuff, breathing, things that Sue has taught us, really helpful. And then actually reverie, letting the mind just go for just a few minutes. I don't need that much time, but just letting it go for a few minutes. Then Tonglen. And at that point, it has settled down enough that the meditation itself isn't so up and down, right?
Yeah.
It's not so challenging. But to answer your question, I feel like there's no time. I really just need all of it.
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
if I've got 20 minutes, then I need 18 minutes, before there's this sort of like all of a sudden things are kind of calm and clear. And
Yeah.
if I'm sitting for 30 minutes, I need 29 minutes, so on. And so I'll take all of it.
Yeah, totally. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, my mind does the same thing
Yeah.
where it'll know almost how long to let it let it go. And then it'll be like it's almost like oh wait a minute.
Oh,
This
yeah,
is
that's right. Oh,
what
I
I'm
came here to
doing.
meditate.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Which I think, sometimes when I'm able to do that a little bit earlier on, where I can kind of be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm meditating. That does help as a little intervention. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, no joke. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that's where I'm at. What about you? What's in your
Hmm.
world, in your mental stream, mind stream?
Yeah. Well, life is interesting as a budding new therapist, There's different ways that I'm being tested, which is really good.
Ooh.
Sometimes feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome. Sometimes feeling a little bit like I'm acting like a therapist, but not necessarily a therapist yet. So that's been kind of fun. Um, but yeah, I'm feeling a lot more confident in working with people who I otherwise wouldn't choose to work with. So I live in a really rural area, and the majority of the population, at least where I work, it's a pretty like Republican area, and a lot of veterans,
Hmm.
and that's been really, really awesome. I have to say, it's been really great, because I think sometimes people come in, they see me, right? And they have their own assumptions and expectations. I'm doing the same, but because I am trained both through, my position, my schooling, but also through the Dharma, to be as, non-biased, and approach with equanimity as possible, there's really this kind of like magic that can happen where it's like oh, otherwise in our world we wouldn't meet, but hey, here we are, this is really cool. So that's been really fun, and yeah, I've had a couple situations with some folks who there was a little test of our trust, um and I think it made our relationship better. So that's been interesting. um as far as my training goes, like, man, my mind is just like, it's just always, it seems like, thinking and thinking and thinking about like what intervention do I want to use with someone? Like I'm just thinking about work, I'm thinking
Yeah.
about all the things. And I imagine that within like a few months, once things have settled into like a new normal, that won't be quite as intense. But I did meet with Lama on Saturday for Darshan. And one thing that was really encouraging was that he reminded me, like, okay, sure, you're having all of this clutter. Um, but just in the same way that when first start working out in a gym, you're lifting like 5 pounds, 10 pounds, and it's pretty hard, right? But then you build up and you're working with like 100 pounds. And so it's going to be just as hard, but you're lifting more and you're working with more. And that was really encouraging. It was like, oh yeah, let me like reflect back on when I first started meditating. Like it was challenging. And yet there was not as much that I was working with in terms of my life and um, my depth of knowledge about the path. And so now, I've got a lot more that I'm working with. So I thought that was a really interesting and helpful thing that he shared to help me kind of conceptualize this part of the path.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. Your capacity has grown, but the sort of the subjective feeling of it is this still this putting this effort into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just kind of feeling constantly um, like I'm in the first stage of shamatha,
Yeah.
which I am, like that's just kind of where I'm at. But I wonder too, like I wonder if like the different stages of shamatha are kind of like universes of their own. Like it seems like they're just like you could probably spin around or, do a labyrinth within the first, second, third, fourth stages of shamatha.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
we were talking about the God realm not too long ago, and they say some of the upper formless God realms correspond to different stages of shamatha.
that's right. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think what you just said is like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. Yeah. How interesting. So I carry on.
Look at you, you got those big old buff muscles.
Yeah. I'm working on them. Nice. And yeah,
Well,
what
I'm
else?
glad to hear it, Jack. That's it. From my own observation, from this sort of point of view over here, I can totally see how ripped you are.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Oh man, that makes me a little embarrassed.
Aw, no, you're accomplished. It's something to be proud of.
Yes, indeed. That's right. And I'm looking forward to, I don't know if you're going to be around for the retreat at the end of the month, but I'm coming down for that. So,
I was just gonna ask you about that. Yes, indeed.
yeah.
Indeed. I will be there and I can't wait to see you there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
So
be going back and forth with our friend Sue.
nice. Yeah.
Yes. Are you camping there?
Not sure. Yeah, I love the camp, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to do it this time. We'll see. It's summer, so it's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last time I camped, it was 40 degrees, which is like, oh my gosh.
That's unpleasant.
It was unpleasant. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, camping always has some level of unpleasantness to it. Something that's not quite comfortable. That's
Yeah.
part of the experience, I think.
It is part of it. Yeah. Yeah, one thing that's part of camping experience for me that I end up enjoying quite a bit is noticing how cold I am, like when I get into the sleeping bag. And then like very slowly over like 10 minutes, I can sense like warmth coming in and I'm just kind of like shifting to find wherever the warmth is like growing bigger. And it's actually kind of nice.
I always notice, so like if a lot of times when I camp, I don't use a sleeping bag in many cases. So it leads to sort of uneven heating and cooling. And
Yeah.
so like in those cases I notice like, oh my gosh, like there's parts of me that are so hot right now and other parts that are like freezing cold. It's uneven. Not like the bed at home.
Yeah, no, not at all. Speaking of which, I'm wondering, have you recently have you done any of like the 8 Mahayana precepts. Have you done that recently?
No, not since the last official one. No,
Yeah.
the next I was thinking about doing it on the next full moon, but that's
Okay.
not until I think like 2 weeks from now, something like that.
Gotcha.
What about you?
I haven't. No,
No?
it's been a good few months or so that I've done that. And I made a loose kind of not promise, I would say, but I was like, I'm kind of I want to do it on the full moon every month.
I remember.
Yeah,
I was there.
you can hold me accountable. But I have not been doing that. Yeah. Um, but there is something about just laying on the floor in my room
Yeah.
that is like it's humbling and it's also kind of nice.
Yep.
So, yeah, I can
Yeah.
still sleep. Right? I can still, I'm
Exactly.
tired.
It can, how are we when we don't have our comforts for just one night, right?
Yeah,
Just one, and they're not even, it's not uncomfortable. It's just like not our usual comforts, right?
right.
Because nobody
Yeah,
said you have to like, sleep on the hard, cold floor with no sheets or anything, right? Like it's not like
yeah.
that. It sort of reminds me, I know Trungpa Rinpoche has he mentioned on a more than one occasion, I think, the value in discomfort and how if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure it was him who recommended wearing like super tight pants sometimes, right? Like
Hmm.
we're wearing clothing that's like too tight because now you're uncomfortable. Good.
Yeah,
Experience that. Not that you should be doing it all the time, but like it's okay. Make yourself uncomfortable at times and see what that's like.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, that we're not going to die.
it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
Right. Well, I
Um,
have been thinking about fasting. So
okay.
the next full moon, which I don't remember exactly when it is, I'm gonna have to look it up after the show and put it on my calendar and do the 8 Mahayana precepts.
Yeah, cool. Well, I was gonna say, depending on what day it is,
You're like,
I'll see
it's a
what it
Friday night. Absolutely not. No,
is. Right. Looks like August 19th.
that's right. It's the
August
19th. That's
19th, which
right.
is a Monday.
Oh, that's
Uh,
Mondays are great for this.
yeah, that's true. And then we'll be able to talk about it on the 20th.
All right. Here, I'm gonna do it right now.
Mondays kind of are the perfect day for
Okay. Yeah.
like householders where it's
Just
like, I don't
eight
know,
mile.
it's um I personally don't have like a lot going on in the evenings and I can just kind of
Okay.
be okay with not eating. Okay,
It's
well,
on like
I'll do
Donkey
it.
Kong.
Dang it.
We're doing it. Now we're committed.
Now we're
Can't
coming.
we can't get out because we said it.
That's what it takes. You need a workout buddy. You
That's
need a
true.
Mahayana
Exactly.
precept buddy.
That's right. And I saw how buff you are, so I want to work out with you.
Nice. Well, you know what I might do, and I'll send you the link for it. But or well, I think you have to register actually. But Sravasti Abbey has a lay person practice on every full moon and new moon. That's
Mm.
the 8 Mahayana precepts, and it's 5 in the morning. And you do it from 5 to 5:30, and then folks who need to leave can leave then, but then from 5:30 to 7, they have their daily practice they do. And I believe, and I know on some days a monastic comes, and I don't, I'm not sure if it's on weekdays. It might just be the weekends. But
Okay.
that's pretty cool. It's nice to do it
Yeah,
with,
send it to me. I'd love to see that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and for folks who don't know, Sarvasti Abbey is a monastic community that's Tupten Chodron is the abbess. And it's a whole community of Tibetan monastics in Eastern Washington, and they're amazing. They do a bunch of talks online and lots out there from them. That's really awesome.
Indeed.
Sweet. Well, hey, should we do some mind training?
Let's do it.
A
I'll
little bit of
share my
mind
screen and pull
training.
up the RLS. What is it? Random Lojong slogan start page. Here we go. Is it on? Can you see it?
Almost. It says started screen sharing. There we go.
All right, very well. So here we are. I'm going to push the big orange button. Oh.
Okay, 48. Train in
Oop.
all areas without partiality. All right. So this is a quote from a commentary on the 7-point mind training by Se Chilbu Choki Gyaltsen, translated by Thupten Jinpa. So it is stated that being angry and vengeful toward enemies and adversaries who are right there in your presence comes about on the basis of frequent interactions. Thus, from one angle, there's a real risk of losing your mind training in relation to those who simply appear repulsive, those who harbor ill will against you, even though you have caused them no harm, and those you find undesirable, even though they harbor no ill will toward you. Therefore, single these people out for special focus and train your mind by perceiving them as parts of your own heart. Wow. Furthermore, because your spiritual teachers, parents, and bodhisattvas are objects of special significance, the fruitional effects are inconceivably grave if you accumulate negative karma in relation to them. Single them out for special focus and engage in the training. All right.
Yeah. Wow.
We're talking about some equanimity here. And that phrase, perceiving them as parts of your own heart, that's really impacting. So seeing our enemies and people who even harbor ill will against us as part of our heart. I'm not
Hmm.
there yet. I can't say that I'm there yet.
I think it's baby steps, Jack.
Yeah, it
I
is. Yeah.
do. I think it's baby steps. I do sometimes get the feeling like I'm not there yet either, but I do sometimes have this sort of exhilarating feeling when I come across people described like this, right? Uh, People who I find repulsive or those who whatever have some ill will towards me or whatever. Like I get sometimes this feeling like they're like it's a little spicy. Like like I get a little bit excited or pleased with the opportunity, I would say. And I have them relatively infrequently because I don't have to like go to a place and work with people, right? I work from home, so and it's easier that way. I think that coming into contact with more people gives you a lot more opportunities, right? Like you've mentioned, people, practicing with people on the ferry and things, people at work and things like that, right? Um, but I'm reminded of something again with Trunkpa, something else with him. I remember reading about how his mother-in-law couldn't stand him. She
That's
absolutely
right.
could not stand him. And so he took it, he made it his mission. He was going to win her over. So he would, come over and do elaborate gestures like bowing down before her and bringing her all kinds of gifts and things like that. And then she fell in love with him.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's a sweet story.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I think it is baby steps along the way, right? Like if we ever recognize these kinds of beings or people, right, that we have interactions with, there's some kind of, I don't know, like some kind of negativity between you. I think that's another one of those sort of places where you can peek behind and see something really precious. I think that I meant to ask you about this, when you were talking about the living in the rural area where you do and working with the people you do if you don't actually find this to be true, right? That maybe that your guys' stories about each other and interpretations of each other give a certain appearance, but then as you dig into it a little bit deeper and you share common ground, that all of a sudden you do in fact see self in other. There's a little bit of that exchange going on.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, surface wise, extremely different. But just the witnessing of someone else's suffering, that's like where I can feel myself, very much so. And because at the core of it, we're all gonna die. We're all facing immense loss all the time, immense dissatisfaction. And however that looks, whether it's, frustration that people don't understand my gender, or, or it's that, maybe from them that people don't understand my severe trauma from being in war. Like these are sufferings, and uh, they're human, and so um, that's where we connect for sure. Um, I'm curious, I know we've talked about it before, but in some ways it's almost easier for me to imagine like being kind or having some like love from a distance of certain enemies where it's like, I don't know, Trump, right, is just such this like example
Yeah.
of like, wow, what a buffoon, such a mess, like just so terrible in so many ways. And yet because he's distant from me, I can kind of like imagine sending him
Hmm.
kindness. Whereas I've been noticing like the most rageful I feel a lot of times is when someone who's close to me doesn't do what I want them to do.
Oh my
You know?
God. Yeah, yeah.
So there's actually sometimes like, and it's a different kind of rage for those loved ones versus Trump, it's but in that moment when I'm feeling like really annoyed and pissed off at my loved one, it's like, man, that's like a burning coal like at my heart. And
Yeah.
um and so maybe this practice of equanimity like really needs to come a little bit closer to home for me in some ways. Like maybe
Well,
my
I
needs are a
yeah,
little closer.
look at what it says in the second part of the commentary there, talking about spiritual teachers, parents, and bodhisattvas. I feel like I had an experience with the parental aspect, and this is to your point about the closeness, right? The closer it is to us, the harder it is to practice in many ways.
Yeah.
And I had this experience just today. I was talking to my brother, and he had one of those experiences that you just described, where one of our parents had not behaved in a way that he wanted them to behave, and had disappointed him and his kids and whatever. And there was a lot of anger and frustration. And it was interesting to me because as I reflected on it, I was like, oh, these very characteristics of our parents that he's dealing with here, like I see that in me. Like
Yeah.
there it is. It's like right here. And not to say that I'm not saying like I'm like my parents in every way, but that these traits or characteristics or tendencies or whatever, they're here too, like in me. And so I don't want to judge them too harshly, right? In fact, judging them doesn't help whatsoever.
Yeah.
And doing a little bit of exchange of self and other, and giving even a little bit of space, like seeing their humanity, like they're close to us, so they're too close, so we can't
Yeah.
see. Once
Yeah.
they're sort of far away, we have this objective view, right? But neither one of them, right? If they're really far away, our understanding of who and what they are isn't real. And if they're too close to us, then it's distorted as well, right? In both cases, it's a little bit distorted.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really interesting. I'm so glad that we got this one tonight.
Yeah, I don't remember getting it before. We may have,
Yeah,
but oh,
let's see what
cool.
the art piece is tonight. Okay. There's a very beautiful standing statue, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, probably from Tibet. It's a wooden statue. Three-headed.
Hey, I have a question about the commentary for you.
Oh,
How do
uh-huh.
you interpret? So it's pretty easy for me um to understand that my spiritual teachers and parents are objects of special significance to me. But they are some like I recognize. I'm like, hey, this is my spiritual teacher, or these are my teachers, and these are my parents. Bodhisattvas, though, how do you interpret that yourself, right? Like in terms of um how would one accumulate negative karma in relation to them? You know what I mean? Or how would we single them
Yeah,
out for
that's
special focus? What comes to your
just
mind? Because I don't quite, it's not clear to me.
yeah, that's not super clear to me either. I'd
Okay.
have to think about that.
Ah, maybe I'll
Um,
talk to Lama about that.
yeah, please do and let us know what you learn.
Yeah,
That'd be
yeah.
great.
Because I would hate to, inadvertently accumulate negative karma towards a bodhisattva, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
and
I
I
also would
know
like to know more about how to single them out for special focus.
yeah, yeah. Well, I know that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can appear to us in many different
Well, that's
forms.
what I'm saying, right? Like, so I don't want to like accident. Maybe it's just like, yeah, all of them, right? Just like
Yeah, everybody.
assume, just assume that that person is in fact your spiritual teacher or your bodhi, or a bodhisattva, or all of these beings are our mothers, right? So I
Yep.
guess sort of it
Yep.
extends outward. I think what is the suggestion is like, hey, regardless of proximity, start
Right.
close and radiate outward.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? When I do think of people that way, like when I'm really kind of in that world of like seeing other people as my teachers and that I can learn something from them, it really it changes things. And bodhicitta just like blossoms. I can like feel it, that it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is real.
Yep. Yep.
This is real. So yeah, good
Yeah, it's
practice.
amazing how the teaching principle is oftentimes at work in the most surprising of places, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, talk
Sure
about
is.
Buddhas and Bodhisattvas showing up and appearing as anyone, right? Like, yeah, teachers abound.
Yeah, absolutely. Sweet. Well, my friend,
Yeah.
we're on to it.
We're gonna have a
Boredom.
boring conversation.
It's going to be pretty exciting, actually. Yeah, this resonated with me a lot, to be thinking about my experience and aversion for boredom. It actually made me a little emotional, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Same.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
It was
How
interesting.
so? How did it feel emotional?
So I have a lot of aversion for boredom. And I think that that's probably a pretty common experience, for human beings in general, but I think especially modern humans, where we have access to everything we could ever want to learn and know. Um, and so if I'm not looking out for it, I'm pretty much always filling my time
Yeah.
with something. And usually it's not entertainment per se, but it is activity. And there's this underlying kind of like pride in being constantly busy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind
Oh
of
yeah.
I've identified with that, actually, that's
Yeah.
it's part of my identity, is that I'm an active person. I get shit done. I'm involved in my community. I'm doing stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so this constant like busyness, uh, when I finally settle, there's actually quite a lot there that I haven't been tending to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And which only, if I'm not being conscious of it, that only spurs me to then get busy again.
That's right.
I'd rather
Yeah.
not be there.
Yeah.
Is this hitting any string chords for you?
Oh, all of them.
Hmm.
Yeah, without a doubt, all of
Yeah.
them. Especially that part, about how when we encounter not non-busyness, sort of peace, calm, when we're abiding in the calm, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
How unnerving it can be, how raw it can be, how like just uncomfortable in general it can be. It's not that it's bad or anything, but rather that there's something about that state that is a little, if you're so used to being constantly entertained by, or not, entertained's not the right word, but busy, preoccupied, attached, whatever,
Mhm.
right? Like if that's our custom, then it's really hard, right, to just sit and be still. And I think it's interesting because this boredom's just one of the manifestations of our this sort of aggression towards peace, is something
Yeah.
that I've heard it called, right? It shows up in different ways, but the boredom is one that like most people, especially early on, experience, but I suggest that it stays for years and it becomes more and more subtle. That in the
Yeah.
beginning, that just in the beginning, the it presents as like, oh, that whatever, I need to call so and so, or maybe I should be doing something else right now. I need to be productive. But then later it becomes a lot more subtle where you recognize that even just the sort of like the faintest whispers of thought, right, are sitting there still pulling you into them. It's
Hmm.
fascinating.
It is really fascinating. Yeah.
I'm gonna say that boredom or aversion to boredom is what got us into this entire mess to begin with.
Yeah. Tell us more about that. What, how?
Okay, all right. You asked for it. You can
I
shut me.
did, and I'm
You
very
shut me
curious.
up. You shut me up if this is too far out there, okay? All right. So let's just say, like, imagine yourself as this is how I think of it. Imagine yourself as like primordial awareness, right? There's no subject object divide. There's just pure awareness, only awareness, not no phenomenon, right? Nothing, just pure, empty, primordial awareness, right? That's all that's there, and there's nothing there. There's nothing to perceive, and it could be this way for an hour. It could be this way for 10 trillion years. Doesn't really matter. It's a timeless state. Nothing's happening, right? And then, and then a little pixel of light appears. The smallest, tiniest, most faintest little dot appears in awareness, right? What would be our reaction to that? What would happen as a result of that little dot, right? If it's this awareness that we're talking about, it's gonna like get all excited and interested in it, right? And
Onto
it's
it. Yeah.
yeah, it's gonna think about it. It's gonna start doing things with that little dot. It's gonna be obsessed with it, right? And then even if that little dot disappears, the absence of that dot is going to be felt, and there's like a new sort of presence. And my what I'm saying is maybe, just maybe, like that sort of state of stillness or whatever, when something catches our eye, it's because of our desire for new and exciting or interesting or whatever that pulls us into
Different.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, I'll
Well,
shut
so
up.
do you think that like how are boredom and ignorance linked? Because I think ignorance is kind of, isn't that what uh is described in the traditional text of being like kind of the root of all of this is ignorance?
Yeah, I would suggest that it is, right? And how that ignorance forms is that we have this this is I'm borrowing from Trungpa on this one, but he says that we try to supplement the brightness of egolessness by putting a lot of other things onto it. And those
Mhm.
things that we put onto it obscure its brilliance. I'm just reading what he says. They obscure its brilliance, becoming blockages and veils. So the ignorance, the blockages, the veils are in fact those things that are captivating us, right?
Mhm.
It's
Well, I
those
imagine our belief that there's something different that we need to somehow manage or, you know, exclude or bring in or is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of my sense of it, right? Like there's this it's like yeah, this terrible fixation with trying to manipulate or get something new or something fresh out of it, right?
Yeah.
It's like things are not okay the way they are, right? And
Yeah.
so and that discomfort with the way things are compels us to start looking around for new and fresh and different, right?
Yep.
And I think that started the whole mess.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so now we're just in a total cycle of yeah, working with boredom or working or not working with boredom.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, this subject is fascinating to me, and I know I mentioned this, but it all started with, our friend Matthew was on the show, right? And he said this thing, like whatever, that led, like this thing about aggression towards peace and about boredom that somehow triggered something. It was like like a little pebble, how it triggers an avalanche,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
Matthew doing that, what his little comment triggered this whole avalanche that's still going.
Yeah.
for me that's all related to boredom, and it's absolutely fascinating to me because I'd never identified as a person who is subject to boredom.
Yeah. Yeah. And why
Never.
is that? Why?
Never been bored. Like I cannot like boredom was never a thing, not even as a kid. Always something to do. And
Something to do. Yeah.
yeah, man, it didn't even matter. You could put me into a blank room, whatever. In fact, I have a story around this, like about sitting in detention in middle school, right? And they tried to make it as boring as possible, and I was like, this is cool. Like
This is great.
this is fantastic. Just me and my thoughts. Like I love this stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like I never thought of myself as being subject to boredom, but that's because I'm so entrenched in this sort of fixation with
Yeah. Yeah.
new and interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you say that you were actually quite like intrigued by and kind of like excited by this kind of experience of just sitting with your thoughts, because that is actually what it sounds uh like your average kind of non-Buddhist intellectual
That's
belief
right.
that boredom is, right? Because like uh I listened to a few talks about boredom, like TED Talks and whatnot,
Mhm.
and people were talking about how valuable boredom is. And the way that it seemed like every person was describing boredom was just allowing yourself uh, to be with your thoughts,
Yeah.
and just like kind of sitting and not doing anything else, just allowing your thoughts to kind of, you know, do what they do. And then that brings in a lot of opportunity for creativity and self-reflection, which are all really good and important things. And so that's kind of like the conventional, I think, uh, boredom that people are saying that you really should engage with, which I think is true. And then there's this other level of boredom that I think is different when we're talking about dharma. Like there's this, what I think, the aggression towards inner peace that you're talking about, like this inner peace that I think as kind of like this boring state, or maybe like I don't even think it's worthwhile like going after, because it's not activity. It's not like engaging. It's just kind of like sitting and paying attention to reality. Like I have an aversion sometimes towards that, because I'm like, well, what is it doing? you know?
Yeah.
Um, so there's kind of these different levels of boredom based on which where you're coming at it from, which I find
I
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that on a relative sense, boredom is seen as valuable because of its tendency, because of our tendency rather, to react to that stillness, to that calm,
Yeah.
with creating something, with making something, right?
Yes.
So they're
Yeah.
saying like, yeah, if you just allow yourself to be bored, you will naturally create new enjoyable
Yeah.
phenomenon,
You'll be able
right?
to do more.
Right. You'll be able to think of new things you've
You'll
never
be
thought
more
of.
productive.
That's right. That's right. And so they're like using this quality, you know, for advantage. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. That's great.
Yeah,
It's kind of like I
totally.
tell my
Yeah.
kids, right? Like, yeah, be bored. Boredom's
Yeah.
good. Like, that's how you eventually then start doodling and making some art or writing some poetry or playing the piano or going for a hike or whatever, right? Or cleaning the
Yeah.
house. Like, you do something because you're bored, right?
Yeah.
But no, the spiritual practice or what we're talking about is not
Yeah.
that.
Well, and even then, I think there's layers, right? Because Rinpoche often talks about the importance of that interplay of stillness and movement.
That's right.
And that, they're working together.
Yeah, you absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're so enraptured with the movement,
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
right? Like that's the part, that's the thing, right? Is that
Yeah.
we became there was just awareness, all still hanging out, doing nothing, and then came a little movement of something, right? And then we like somehow got into that, right? And chased after that movement. That's sort of, like that's the way that I see it. And we're constantly looking to do that because we're so caught up in the movement that we don't see the background. We don't so we're watching the movie, we're all wrapped up in the movie, but we're not paying attention to the screen behind the movie or the TV itself, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's not to say that one is the truth or one is reality. It's not like that, right?
Yeah.
But if you're going to balance, if you're going to be a walk that sort of middle way, you at least have to increase your awareness of that awareness, right?
Yeah.
That stillness. And we're so accustomed, we've spent lifetimes upon lifetimes avoiding that, right? Like turning away, increasing more, putting more layers on, maybe this will do the trick, maybe this will satisfy. And sort of at the end of it, there's this sort of feeling of like, that's not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
That all that chasing, it's not going to quite pan out for us because it's
Yeah.
all sort of empty, right? It's
Right.
fleeting.
And it's interesting that you say empty because there's one level of emptiness that is, the spiritual level, but then I'm thinking about how when I'm really, really engaging in that avoidance of boredom and I'm super busy and just constantly moving, there's an emptiness in uh the conventional way where you kind of say like, gosh, I just feel empty. Like I feel like there's no meaning, there's just this kind of like blank hole at my heart, because I'm just
When does that arise?
with well, I think that, well, that's what made me so sad when contemplating this reaction that I have to boredom, is that, I'll oftentimes just go and go and go, but I'm not actually engaging with life. There's this way that not allowing boredom um means that I'm kind of shallowly just doing all of these things to kind of avoid um, really being in reality. And
Yeah.
so there's this sadness, there's this depression that comes
Yeah.
along with a version of boredom.
Well,
Um,
so this is exactly what this is exactly what you're saying, what Trungpa was saying as well. So here there's this, what I put this little quote in my notes here. He says, when tenderness tinged by sadness touches our heart, we know that we are in contact with reality, right? That it's not all bright sunshine and rainbows and butterflies and things like that. That actually when we relinquish, right? When we sort of renounce, if you will, the movement for a moment in meditation, and we just sit with what is, right? Then it really can open up this sadness at perceiving sort of like the way things are, right? Like there is this sort of like no, this sort of giving up because we're so identified with these phenomena and whatnot, right? That there's this sadness, there's this sort of having to give up your sense of self in a sort of way, right?
yeah,
And I think that what happens is that that provokes, if you think about the ego as an entity, right, which we don't have to, but just for this conversation, if you think about the ego as an entity, it's super scary, right? That's a frightful thing because that's sort of, that's it's saying that you don't exist, right? Or it's undermining your reality. And that's super duper scary. And so
yeah,
it's natural that it provokes. It's sort of, Trungpa himself says that it's a good point of reference. Like it's actually a good thing that those feelings that arise, sometimes it shows up as boredom, sometimes it shows up as irritation with our thoughts,
mm,
self-condemnation. It shows up in all kinds of different ways, but that can be used as a reference point that we're moving in the right direction, that stillness, right?
yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and maybe there's also this like, so that feels like a pretty subtle level of recognition. Um, whereas maybe I was also thinking of this kind of coarse level of recognition of boredom where it's like I'll I'll realize that like I don't even really know like um what I'm doing in life sometimes, right? Like, do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like where
Yeah.
you're not engaging, right? It's like
Ah,
um uh
oh, I know what you're talking
and so
about.
there's that
Yeah.
sadness there too,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like kind of like the course level of your life where it's like, gosh, what am I?
Would
I
you
don't
say
even
that
know the
it's
people around me,
yeah, yeah. Oh
that
my
kind of
God. Okay.
feeling.
I think I get what you're laying down. Is it
Yeah.
is it like this that at some point you're like, I'm not actually really alive. Like I'm not
Yeah,
actually living. I'm not
exactly.
really present. I'm not really actually vibrantly alive. I know that
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
there, right? But I'm not doing that. And there's this sort of sadness because there's a yearning for, we're like, I
We
had
want
this
to
feeling too.
live.
Yeah, you're like, I want to be alive. I
Yes.
want to be, the highest whatever I can be, the most alive I can be, the most connected, most beneficial, most everything. And I'm
Yeah.
not that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God, Jack. I was just, yeah, yeah. I was thinking about it today in the form of like a zombie almost. Like,
Yes.
God, I want to so bad. I want to, like when Rinpoche talks about the path and how the whole point of it is to really embrace life, right? To
Yeah.
really allow life's energy to flow through us, right? And around us and in us and all of that, right? And when he talks like that, it's like, oh, it's like poetry. It sings to me, and it provokes that same sadness where I'm like,
It's
oh, but I'm not doing that. I'm trying for that. I'm aiming for that. I hope that the path I'm on will lead me to there, but it doesn't feel like I'm there yet.
yeah. Yeah. For
Is
sure.
that what you were saying?
Exactly.
Okay,
Hit the
okay.
nail on the head. Yeah, hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious then, so what do we do? What do we do with this?
Well, I think that I think two things come to my mind. One of them is it really speaks to the first the first sort of critical juncture on the path, which is renunciation, right?
Mm.
And that's a whole other topic for a different show at some point. But just recognizing like, hey, I'm sort of neurotically chasing all this movement, right?
Yeah.
It's not that
Well,
any. What's
I was
that?
just going to say, Rinpoche, one of his favorite translations of renunciation is definite emergence.
That's right.
And I feel like that
Thank
really
you.
resonates with
Yeah,
what you're talking about right now,
right,
especially it's like we want to emerge from that place of like being submerged by our ignorance. We
that's
want
right.
to we want to emerge into life and to really
That's right.
living. Yeah.
That's right, right, right. Like the lotus popping up above the water and blossoming,
Mm.
right? But we're like, oh my God, I'm not there yet. Still under the water. I'm still in the
Yeah.
murky, right? And we
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to, yeah, yeah, it is like that. Thank you
Mm.
for that. That's a good reminder.
Mm.
And the other aspect, I think, besides sort of definite emergence or renunciation is the transition of this boredom itself. Like we have to engage in some exposure therapy.
Yeah.
And there's a number of different ways. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about a couple of these things that would be super
Yeah,
helpful.
please.
So we can transform this boredom into something else, something that can be referred to. Trungpa calls it cool boredom. I think his son calls it seasoned boredom,
Mm.
right? Like it's not
Mm.
immature anymore. And I think that the way, and that's a good thing, right? Like once we get to that point, but that there's this the way to work with it, according to Lama, partially. I talked to him about it, and he said one thing to see is the emptiness of boredom and distraction. And one way to do that is to, in meditation, try to become bored. Spend an entire session being bored. Like sit down, tell yourself, now I'm going to be bored and I'm going to examine my boredom. Try it. It'll be the most exciting, most interesting sit you've ever had. Con Conversely, try to be distracted. Sit down and say, today I'm going to be super distracted. I'm going to really not pay attention to my awareness. I'm just gonna really, really be distracted. Like do it. See what happens, right?
Yeah.
Come back to your object of focus every time, right? Like if you notice yourself sort of mindfully present, like, nope, nope, that's not what I'm trying to do, right? Distract yourself. I've done both of these exercises. They're incredibly valuable.
Wow.
And I think that so that I think both of those are kind of fun and active and engaged ways of sitting with it and getting some exposure therapy. But you could also go the Bodhidharma route, right? His wall gazing. This is a Zen sort of thing, right? Sit and look at the wall, right? Or
Yeah,
something else that you find boring. Just sit with it and see what happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Maybe I need to I don't know, sit and read my car manual that I haven't taken out of the plastic
A,
because
a
I'm just like, no.
Yeah, yeah. A friend of ours told me a story anyway about meeting with Lama early on for darshan, and she showed up and she said, "Well, I don't really have any. I didn't prepare to any. I don't have any thoughts. I don't have any. I don't know what to say. I don't have anything to ask you." And he said, "Okay, that's fine. Let's read the yellow pages together." And that it turned out to be quite a memorable and insightful experience for them, right? But
Yeah,
lean into it. See about that boredom. See if it is what you think it is, right? Because it turns out that, as with, so many other things, people and other aspects of our reality, mental and otherwise, things aren't as they appear, and that includes boredom,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be all bad.
Super interesting. Huh. Thanks for all these tips. I'm really glad that you've done all this research into boredom because then I don't have to.
Dude, it's a freaking avalanche. It's all Matthew's fault.
Yeah.
So if you ever, when you come down for the retreat, if I'm still on about the whole boredom thing, you can blame him and say like he shouldn't have started that thing. But there was one thing that came up in my research that I want to share briefly, and
Yes,
this is
please.
hopefully just enough to encourage listeners to go and check it out themselves. I really enjoyed. I came across a text by Neguma, a Dakini from way back when. It's called "The Four Faults of Natural Awareness," which I think is an interesting title, and it goes like
Hmm.
the four faults are. They're talking about Rigpa, natural awareness, right? Um, it's too close to be recognized. It's too simple. It's too profound. And it's too excellent. And the commentaries on that, and even if you just sit with those alone, like what does that mean? I find it to be really helpful when thinking about boredom.
Hmm. Thank you for that. Yeah. Too close to be recognized. Too
Hmm.
simple. Yeah, yeah. It's right there. I know
It's
it's
right
right
there.
there.
It was never
Oh.
not there. You can't avoid your Buddha nature, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like it's just all covered up with all these distractions
yeah.
because we were bored. We got bored.
We got bored. Yep. Well, Daniel, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I feel, yeah, my heart's a little bit hurty. It's a little bit
Yeah.
sad, but it's that kind of way that we're talking about.
That hurt that you're experiencing, my friend, that's the heart of a warrior. That's
Yeah.
fearlessness right there. If you're willing to go ahead and sit with that hurt and explore what that means and why it's there, then you're a real warrior. So you got big old buff everything. You're really working out.
It comes first full circle. All right, my friends, have
All
a
right.
beautiful week.
Bye. Thank you, Jack. Bye,
Thanks, Daniel.
everybody.